Greetings, this is Fred Witzig, and this is the next installment of the reading guide for Abigail Favale's Genesis of Gender, right here. So I did a video on chapters 1, like the beginnings through 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. This evening, I'm going to do one on chapters 4 through 6. And the reason we're going to speed it up a little bit is because I think chapter 3 is the most difficult one. It's the most theoretical one, the most jargony one. After that, it gets a lot more practical. So I think that there's just less to be said about it in terms of explaining things. But I think chapters 4, the rest of the book after chapter 3 is really good and gives really powerful application to what she talked about in the first few chapters. There's a few things, overall themes, that I think you should just keep on following as you go through the book. One is that our society sees the body as the problem, a problem to be managed or manipulated or changed or destroyed. Somehow or another, our bodies, in our society's world, our bodies are not a gift like God says they are. Our bodies are a problem that have to be dealt with. And so I think you'll see this in the chapters coming up. So the chapter 4 is called Control, which is very interesting to think about. And I hope you pay attention to that title, Control, because this is a really, if you keep that in mind, you'll kind of get her chapter better, I think, a little bit. So I'm just going to go through here. I've got a bunch of pages marked, and we're just going to talk about various ideas here. Page 88, talking about Margaret Sanger, who is the hero or heroine of the abortion, like Planned Parenthood, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and still their hero. Just really an awful person, to be honest with you. And this is what she wrote. Women had chained herself to her place in society and the family through the maternal functions of her nature, and only chains thus strong could have bound her to her lot as a brute animal for the masculine civilizations of the world. Okay, so her body here is construed as chains. She is bound to her body, which is her problem. So here we have, as Favale says, women are oppressed by their own bodies. That is Sanger's view and modern-day feminist view. That to me is highly problematic when you read the scripture and you see that actually our bodies are a miraculous gift, fearfully and wonderfully made in all of its varieties, but both male and female bodies are gifts to be celebrated. Page 89, the birth control movement in America founded by Sanger was resoundingly eugenicist. Eugenics is the practice that was popular in the early 1900s, late 1800s and early 1900s, that gained its most infamous and horrible expression in the Nazi movement in the 1930s. Nazis were eugenicists. They saw Jews as an inferior race that needed to be eliminated. Eugenics is the belief that either through birth control or birth management, or maybe even killing off, somehow we need to scientifically manipulate people so that inferior races are extinguished. It's a horrible idea, right? I mean, first of all, who's inferior? Well, it depends on who's in power and who's doing the actual control. So it's a terrible thing, and she was a eugenicist. Margaret Sanger, the founder and hero of so many feminists, including Planned Parenthood, was a eugenicist. Now, to be fair, many others of her age were as well. So, it doesn't excuse her, but still. By the way, I should point out that eugenics is still a thing today. We don't really like to give it that phrase, but it's increasingly an issue. For instance, the idea that we should abort children with some sort of birth defects or even Down syndrome, that's eugenicist. That is just plain old eugenicist. That's not my opinion. That's the idea of eugenics. You have people you don't like, then manipulate the birthing, the reproduction system or whatever, and eliminate those people you don't like. I think is Denmark maybe. There's a country in Europe that advertises we don't have any more Down syndrome babies anymore. Well, yeah, because you killed them all before they were born. It's just a terrible thing, but unfortunately it's still with us. Page 90, control. That is the cornerstone of Sanger's ideology. This is not control over our passions or destructive desires, an ideal Sanger calls an absurdity. This is control over biology, over nature herself. Sanger's vision of progress is an inversion of ancient wisdom. Rather than curbing our will to live in harmony with nature, we contort nature to unleash our will. And so there you get kind of the layout of the rest of the chapter. And that is that what we want is not to live in harmony with nature or celebrate nature or be thankful to God for nature, but to control it somehow, some way, to bring it under our control so that we can live out our pleasures, our fantasies, whatever they are. Bottom of page 92, a Christian vision of women's health is one that sees female physiology in terms of wholeness rather than pathology and works with, not against, the natural order of the female body. This is one thing you'll see here. And I don't know what you think about birth control. That's not really my point. But one of the things that I think is actually kind of brilliant in this chapter is she points out that birth control operates on the assumption that a normal, healthy female body, or now increasingly male bodies with some forms of male birth control, either way, a healthy, normally operating body is a problem. And so birth control aims to, in a sense, make the body sick, make it defective, so that we can control it and have our pleasure. It's sort of an interesting concept that I hadn't thought of before. To problematize the body so much, to problematize health so much, that you actually make something sick in order to make it do what you want. It's an interesting idea. And she says that's a horrible thing and worthy of consideration, I think. Page 105. Through normalizing contraception, we have erased fertility from our consciousness. This has reshaped, how could it not, our shared understanding of the purpose of sex, which in turn has altered our behavior. No longer is there an expectation of sexual restraint for some higher good. By restraint, I'm not gesturing toward a Victorian flight from the body and sexuality. I'm pointing back even further to the ancient philosophers who all recognize that happiness lies in the self-balancing work of virtue, cultivated habits that liberate us from being pawns of our appetites. Then she goes on and talks about this man she saw in an airplane, and pretty dismal there. And that's because of birth control, we separate procreation from the sexual acts, and sex becomes a commodity, something like you buy on the market, and there's very little meaning beyond that. Page 108, this I think is really important. Consent should be the starting point rather than the end of the discussion about sexual morality. It is not enough to say that the best we can expect from sex, morally speaking, is that it's not rape. Okay, this reigns on college campuses. The only restraint college students are supposed to show with regard to sexuality, or with regard to almost anything, at least anything having to do with their body, is be sure you get consent first. Like, that's the only moral code left standing on college campuses. Just make sure there's consent. And of course, the problem is, well, how do you get consent? How do you know you have consent? If it's verbal, what if the partner says yes, but then the next day says, actually, that was rape? How do you prove that? That's why you have Title IX offices. That's why you have sexual harassment and sexual assault offices. That's why you have all this mess, is because the only rule we have is consent. So now we make all sorts of codes about what constitutes consent and how do you record it, how do you protect yourself from from false accusations that you got consent, but that you didn't get consent when you really did. How do you, like all these things? There's a whole law book now on how to deal with consent, because that's the only thing left. It's pretty sad. Okay, the next chapter, which is titled Sex. Here we get a little bit more into philosophy. In the bottom of page 117, we get back to essentialism, which we've already dealt with. The idea that all women share some intrinsic property that characterizes womanness is called essentialism. An essentialist perspective affirms that men and women are fundamentally or essentially different. Okay. This is sort of the understanding, the traditional understanding. God created male and female, and there are certain things that pertain to males and females. There are certain things that pertain to them essentially. All males have this, all females have that. And that is essentialism. There's something innate built into being male or being female. Page 118. Feminist thought, for reasons described above, is overwhelmingly anti-essentialist. And to escape the tension caused by rejecting essentialism on the one hand, while retaining a woman-centered movement on the other, many feminists appeal to nominalism. Nominalism, which evokes the notion of nom, or name, is the idea that we can group things together in name only, without appealing to a universal essence that transcends culture. Feminist theorists write of using essentialism nominally and strategically, appealing to a catch-all category when it suits, rejecting the category when it doesn't, and resisting any attempts to define that category. Okay, this is really important. So, feminists are non-essentialists, meaning there's nothing inherently essential to being a female or woman, or a female or male. But then if you're a feminist, how do you protect women? If there's really no such thing as women, how do you protect them? If you say anything like pink is not female, okay, so then what is female? Saying pink is not female is non-essentialist. Pink is not essential to being female. Say, okay, I think we can all buy that. But what about being more nurturing? Being more nurturing rather than male, which is more aggressive. Feminists would say, no. Being more nurturing is not female. It's not essential to being female. It's not part of being female. Okay. How far down this scale do we go? What exactly does pertain to essentialism? Excuse me, what exactly does pertain to femaleness? Feminists push them against the wall, and they're going to say, push them in a corner, and they're going to say, there's nothing actually female to being female. Oh, but wait. They're trying to protect women who are ostensibly female. So what she's saying is, rather than essentialism, they're going with nominalism. Nominalism is the idea that we can't really know what is essential to one category or another. We just name it. We just look at what, we just kind of identify these things. So what is a dog? Nobody really knows exactly how to define a dog. But we just say that four-legged creature over there is a dog. And then we all just kind of, yeah, that's just a dog. Is that really a dog? Well, it's what we use. It's the term we use. Aha, that's artificial. Terms are artificial, they will say. We looked at earlier in the book about how language is mushy. We can use different terms and things can mean different things. Okay, so we just name it then. Let's just name those creatures dogs, even though we don't really know exactly what it is to be a dog. Same thing with anything else in the world. A car, a plane, love, animosity, fear, right? All these things. What are they? Well, we just name things. That's all we do. We just name things. We're not saying there's anything essential about it. We're just naming things. So we just name, in this case, we just name certain certain Homo sapiens, we name them female in order to protect them. But there's nothing actually really female about them. That's the secret. Okay, so they use female when it suits them, and when it doesn't, they reject it. You may have heard of a film that recently came out called What is a Woman? And everybody agrees, yes, there's woman. But if you say, what is it? They'll just say, well, a woman is a woman. Nobody wants to identify it, because if you say a woman is, then you're essentializing womanness. You're actually saying there actually is something woman, and it is that right there. Well, that's essentialist. So they just say, well, it's what you identify as a woman. It's just getting very, very convoluted, right? It's getting very hard to track down and say. Okay. Page 120. How does this help us define woman? In my prior and failed attempts to settle on a definition, I was working only with the idea of actuality, fumbling to find a characteristic that would actually be true for all women at all times. Okay, this is a really crucial section here, and I hope that you get this. We Christians would say, well, women can have babies, men can't. The response to that, which on the surface is a good response, is, well, but not all women can have babies. What about when, women who are over 50, they can't have babies. Are they not still women? Or what about women who are infertile? Or women who never have a baby? What about that? What about those people? Are they no longer women? Okay, she uses the term potentiality. Bottom of the page 120. Potentiality solves this problem. A woman is the kind of human being whose body is organized around the potential to gestate new life. This potentiality that belongs to femaleness is always present, even if there is some kind of condition such as age or disease that prevents that potential from being actualized. The very category of infertility does not undermine this definition, but affirms it. A male human who cannot get pregnant is not deemed infertile because he never had that potential in the first place. Males don't have the potential to have babies. None of them do. A woman who cannot get pregnant does have that potential, and so she is considered infertile. Infertility names the often painful and devastating inability to actualize one's procreative potential. Do you get that? I think this is genius. We don't call a woman who is infertile a man. We call her a woman who is infertile. A man who can't have babies, we don't call infertile. We call him a man, because a man never has the potential of having a baby. I think that's genius. Her second response to those who would say, well, what about a woman who can't have babies and that sort of thing? My second response is to call to mind again that guiding principle of thinking like a Catholic. When we talk about people, we are always talking about bodies and souls, physical, spiritual beings. Our consideration of womanhood must include bodily sex, but must also extend beyond it to consider the whole person. That's the lively tension we need to inhabit, to remain rooted in the body, but not reduced to the body. Okay, let's move on here to page 128. Here she says, and this is a major question of mine. Okay, if we say that pink is not necessarily feminine, if we say that being more nurturing is not just feminine, if we say that playing football is not just male, if we say that being more aggressive is not just male, if we say that, if we just say all these things are, because she deals with stereotypes here, right? She deals with stereotypes in here. It says we have to be careful in attaching stereotypes to male or femaleness. Okay, I get that. But if we keep doing that, if everything just becomes, well, that stereotype, then what is there actually to being a man or a woman? What exactly is it? Well, she wants to, on one hand, reduce it. Well, she doesn't want to reduce it to biology, but she does say, at the very minimum, there is a sort of a floor, a floor, like a basement, a baseline definition of maleness and femaleness, and that is gamete production. And I'm not really all that. I'm not that much of a scientist to be able to know exactly what is going on here, but gamete production is the foundation, she says on page 128, is the foundation of biological sex. Males produce cells, reproductive cells, that will, that fit the male category. Female bodies produce female reproductive cells that reproduce female bodies, or that are female reproductive cells, and that's baseline. Even if there is some sort of even if there's like in an intersex person where maybe there's some male and female genitalia present on the same body, but still that body, she says, will produce either a male or a female gamete. That's just how it is. So she brings it all the way down to just the gamete. And yet, she doesn't want to just say that that's all there is. The reason why she focuses on gametes, in my opinion, is because of this new idea pushed by feminists that there is no such thing as male or female bodies. There are bodies that range from tall, broad-shouldered, strong-muscled, male genitalia, virile, male bodies that we call male, all the way over to, whatever you define as the ultimate female body. But then there's a whole, like, everybody falls in between, they say. And we have just sort of artificially drawn a line and said, boom, these are going to be males, and boom, these are going to be females, even though they don't really fit categories very well. So, like she says at the beginning of the book, feminists want to destroy all categories. They don't want any categories at all. They want to destroy all of that. No structures nor categories when it comes to gender and sexuality. So, she says no. At the very minimum, male bodies will always produce male gametes and female gametes. And that's at the very baseline level. That's how you can distinguish between the sexes. All right, her discussion of intersex is, I think, absolutely beautiful, which she does in this chapter and I think the next. She really does not like the way feminists use intersex people for their arguments. Intersex people, and apparently she's part of this movement to really get intersex rights. It used to be when intersex people were born, this is her history here, that she describes here, that when intersex people were born, doctors would do surgery right away and say, you have to have either a typical male or typical female body. And they would do surgery and mangle bodies in order to make them conform to certain visual appearances. And that was devastating, she says, to intersex people. Now you go to the chromosomes, you go to the gametes, and you say, this is what you are, male or female, and you let the body alone. And you accept, she says, you accept the body as a gift. Instead of mangling it to fit one appearance or another, you accept it as a gift. And now feminists are in essence saying, no, your body is a problem, and we need to mangle it to fit whatever perception people have about maleness and femaleness. I love her argument because she's saying, she comes at this not as a kind of a intersex are problem people, but like, hey, intersex are beautiful people, and we can celebrate them. We don't have to fear them. We don't have to mangle them to try to make us more like this or that. We can celebrate them. And these battles have been hard fought, and now they're won, except feminists are complicating the situation and using intersex people as for their own political purposes. And this is really, I think, a major problem. Okay, the last part of the sex chapter gets really Catholic. Some people don't like that. It doesn't bother me. But I think it's really good. She finishes here. Despite its so-called progressivism, the current portrayal of intersex people as neither men nor women is simply the latest version of this othering, the updated, politically permissible way of saying freak and it. And I think that is, she gives a story of how it used to be, a circus sort of a thing where, ooh, go and see this freak intersex person. And thankfully we've gotten beyond that, only now intersex people are just still museum pieces, still circus show people to fit some other political agenda. It's really bad. So she comes at it from, I think from a place of love and compassion, and I think she makes a really good argument. Okay, here. The next chapter she gets into gender, and she traces the meaning of the words gender and sex. Before the middle of the 20th century, the word gender lived discreetly in the realm of grammar as a basic word denoting a category, kind, or class. So you have female and male words. And there's not necessarily any rhyme or reason sometimes to lots of languages have male gender words and female gender words. And there's just who knows where that came from. And that's all it was. Until recently, that's all it was. Is in German, der is female, der is male, die is female, and das is neuter. It's just the way it is. A female, I think, is a das Abflug or der Abflug. I can't remember. Anyway, it's just different words have different genders. Spanish does the same thing. Lots of languages do the same thing. English doesn't, but most languages do this. A lot of languages do this, and it's no big deal. And gender is the term used to describe the different words. The word sex, in contrast, has referred exclusively to male and female differences in living beings. That is the predominant way of looking at things. You have gender for language and that sort of thing, and then you have sex for differences between males and females. Perhaps most importantly, this intrinsic sex identity is not merely about external appearance, but also intimately connected to procreative function, one's generative potential as a male or female. By the way, I'm on page 142 for gender and sex, and now on page 143. She points out that sex is about procreation. Well, how do we arrive at this cultural moment where bodily sex is no longer considered to be integral to personhood, but is ornamental, easily altered, a fiction assigned at birth? I like to argue that this new understanding of sex can be traced in large part to two related innovations in the mid-20th century. First, the widespread embrace of contraception, which then enabled a newly expansive concept of gender to emerge. Okay, so what she said, go down to the bottom of page 143, our procreative capabilities are seen as incidental to manhood and womanhood, rather than an integral aspect, indeed the defining feature of those very identities. Okay, so what she's saying is, look, in the 20th century, what happens is that we go from gender referring to like a class of words and that sort of thing, and sex to differentiate between male and female, to now sex, as she points out in 145, sex is no longer served merely as shorthand for one's biological sexual identity, but expanded to indicate any kind of erotic genital activity. Sexuality no longer referred to one's maleness or femaleness, but to the flavor and expression of one's erotic desires. This dethroning of sex created a conceptual vacuum, one quickly filled by the term gender. So as sex came to be associated with activity and desire, rather than biological reality, it left space for, well, then what do we call maleness and femaleness? Oh, that's gender. So now gender refers to what it typically means to be male and what it typically means to be female, whereas sex refers to activity and desire. And the rest of the chapter is just really an explanation of this. How it came to be that we use gender for gender comes to be used for stereotypes, or how we identify. It's my identity. I identify as a male, that sort of thing. Whereas sex is referred to activity or desire. And that's what this chapter is trying to explain. Along the way, she makes a point that I think is really important. Bottom of page 147. She says this. Well, she's looking at stereotypes. At the end of chapter 2 or 3, she made the comment that we need to understand modern-day feminism so that we could use what is good and right out of it. And some people are like, whoa, there's anything good in feminism? Yes, there is. Because feminism has shown us that we have been unfair in certain ways, unright, unjust to females in certain ways. And we've gone overboard in what we attach to being female and what we attach to being male. And page 147 at the bottom, I think, is a good example of this. Historically, arguments appealing to natural weaknesses or deficiencies in women have been used to justify denying them certain rights and opportunities, such as the right to vote or attend medical school. Let's look at some of these arguments in very basic terms. Premise 1. Men and women are essentially or ontologically different. Premise 2. Every difference represents a difference in value. Conclusion. Men are essentially superior to women. That's how some people used to think. Yes, men and women are essentially or ontologically different, and men are better than women. Oh, that's a problem. Next one, premise 1. Men and women are essentially or ontologically different. Premise 2. These differences can be easily summarized in a list of contrasting traits that characterize each sex. For example, women are inherently more emotional while men are inherently more rational. Conclusion. The differences between men and women are clearly defined and necessitate distinct sex-specific roles in the home and society. Ooh, that's a problem, right? What she's saying is there are often, females often exhibit certain characteristics and men often exhibit other characteristics. Okay, but that doesn't mean that all women are this way and all men are that way. If you say all women are this way and all men are that way, then what she says is you start saying, well, then women can only do this and men can only do that. Because women are made for this and all women are made for this and all men are made for that. And that's just not true. So she wants to kind of problematize that and say, hey, we need to be very careful about what we say is male and what we say is female. She'll deal with this in terms of transgender, which I think is really, really important. This is so important when we deal with the realm of transgender. And that is, I've used this a number of times before, but a girl who likes to play football is not a boy. She's simply a girl that likes to play football. There's nothing inherently masculine about female versus female. There's nothing inherently masculine about football versus feminine, right? It's just most males do seem to like football. Most females don't, but let's not make that like biological. And so if a girl wants to like football, let her like football. That's no big deal, right? If a boy likes to knit socks, let him knit socks. There's nothing inherently feminine about knitting. So she wants to open up these categories so that we don't constrict them to all girls have to do this. No boys can do that. No, there can be overlap. Just because there are some generalizations doesn't mean there can't be overlap. This I think, is very helpful in dealing with some transgender, at least some, probably many transgender situations, where instead of saying, oh, you like football? Well, then you must be a boy. We need to do surgery to make you into a boy so that you can play football. No, let the girl play football if she wants to. That sort of thing. So she's going to go on with that in this chapter, and I think the next one she'll talk about that idea. All right, so that's those 3 chapters. Hopefully this was helpful in some way, useful in some way. Hopefully you see the importance of the separation between the body and the spirit or soul, that we can't separate the two. I am both body and soul, body and spirit, and both are gifts from God. They're part of me, and my body is not a problem. It's not something to be mangled and manipulated and controlled. It's part of me. It's a gift from God. It's good. Same with you. Same with every last person on this earth can say the same thing. Their body is a gift to them, to be treasured, to be used, to be lived out, and not to be mangled or mutilated or destroyed or changed or denounced or degraded. It's part of us. What a gift. When we go against that in various ways, whether you buy her contraceptive argument or not, she has an argument to be made that contraception denies that giftedness of the body. And then now she'll say feminism denounces the body, trashes especially the female body. Transgenderism is an issue with this. Hopefully you kind of see this as you read through. All right, thank you for reading the book, and God bless you as you read it.